Hello, I'm Rob Price. This season, we're exploring agentic AI from the perspectives of those driving its evolution. Welcome to Futurise.
Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Shikoh Gitau. I'm the CEO of Color. Color is a digital innovation lab. We are headquartered in Nairobi, and our goal is to utilize Africa's digital future. We like to think of ourselves as the skankwak for Africa. We provide advisory, provide deep tech research, we provide product development for Africa's most persistent challenges. And we remove the mystery of Africa when it comes to technology, especially digital technology and AI. Thank you.
And Shikoh, so I'm delighted that you've joined the podcast. We met last week at an AI event in London, and one of the things that you did was a lightning presentation at the start, talking about some of the work that you'd done in Africa, and that just jumped out, and I thought that'd be brilliant to talk about. So you gave some examples around the use of AI in those cases. Could you talk a bit more about the type of work that you're doing with AI and what AI means to you at the moment?
So I tell everybody that AI is a consequential technology of our generation. And for me, I feel like it's deja vu from 2007, 2009, the period that mobile phones became consumer products on the African continent because there was the liberalization of the telecom sector. A lot of private companies were able to provide phone. And in the UK or in Europe, this might sound a bit strange, but for the longest time in Africa, a phone was shared by a whole village. And this phone was at the post office. So if you needed to make a call, you go to the post office, and the post office person will make a call on your behalf on the landline. And the same way you'll be saying, I'll be coming tomorrow at 4 p.m. to receive a call. And in my younger days, yes, I'm not that old, that did happen. But in the 2000s, between 2007 and 2010, there's the innovation of the sector where telecommunication was, which allowed mobile phone private entities to come onto the continent and enable communication via mobile phones, which meant that many more people were able to access a mobile phone. And this also gave way to cheaper handsets, more than the very $10,000 handsets that were there in the 90s for mobile connectivity. They were much cheaper. And this has been the trend since then. At the same time, there was the intersection between the access of mobile phone, which meant access to mobile internet, cranky, edge, 2G connectivity, but still internet. But the big jump for Africa was social media. Up to this point, the internet was one way. Everybody was consuming what somebody else was putting on the internet. And social media gave way to user-generated content, which enabled anybody with a mobile phone to be able to connect and provide their opinion in their own language and have an audience who will consume the content in their language. So this user-generated content season or phase of the internet gave a huge outburst of internet use on the African continent. I remember because I was in uni in 2007, we had a small group of people who were allowed to use Facebook because Facebook was on test mode. But within a year, which is like 2008, 2009, everybody was in the internet, like all my neighbors, everybody was on Facebook. I had and having 1,000 friends on Facebook in 2009 was a lot of people. And you realize that everybody now is getting onto the internet. And so that mystery was broken. And for me, that is the moment we are in right now when it comes to AI. is this intersection of highly available knowledge, yeah, at the click of a button. I can literally have a conversation on any topic on earth because I have ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or DeepSeek on my phone. Literally, it has democratized knowledge, which means that every African person can be able to access huge amounts of knowledge at the click of a button, knowledge that was initially safeguarded under world paywalls, under embargo in somebody's server, now is easily available. I mean, the ethics of it is questionable, but you can see the tipping point is I don't have to pay expensive school fees for my child to be able to learn higher level high school maths. Yeah. I don't have to go to a bootleg dark web website to get a textbook for a medical student. I don't have to pay a lawyer huge amounts of money to access justice because this information is easily accessible and in a language I can understand and in a format, if you're talking about multimodality of AI, in a language I can understand, which is the tipping point for me. And that is what, for me, this moment is about and why AI is important. To your point is why Africa, why at this point what we are doing is we have discussed about this AI. And whenever I travel to the US or the UK, even during the London Tech Week, the AI Summit, there was Viva Tech in France, every conversation is like, we're launching this model. It's fast, it can do this. And I'm thinking, nobody in Africa cares about how fast your model is. It is about, are you solving my problem? Yeah. Are you able to educate my child? Are you able to give me medical services? Are you able to help me make more money in the stock exchange? And that's what we do, is making AI real. We love the models. We love the LLMs. They are making life so easy for us who are able to use it. But the last mile, a majority of the 1.5 billion Africans, is how do we make this AI real to their daily life? And that's what we do at Kala, is taking use cases that are speaking to a majority of the people and enabling solving problem. But you're not doing it just as Scala. Our goal is to enable an ecosystem across the continent. So we work across 5 pillars. We work, we say Africa needs 5 things to have a thriving AI ecosystem. The first one is data, which I've spoken about, right? The second one is compute, talent, use cases, which I've talking about, and governance. So starting with governance, our politicians and our policymakers are our weakest link. Yeah. Somebody will sign some document and they don't have a full understanding of what this looks like. So our goal is to be able to enable and capacity build our policymakers around what AI is and the potential of AI on the African continent. We do this with something called AI 101 masterclasses for policymakers, but also we have developed a toolkit for any policymaker on the African continent to have a starting point on policy making for AI. The second part of it, which is important, is data. Africa only contributes to less than 2% of the data set that is informing the current AI revolution, 2%, a population of 1.5 billion. Not for lack of data, but the data is there are 3 challenges we are solving. Number one is some of it is not digitized. It does not appear in any digital format. So for example, Africa has 2,000 languages. About 600, about 60 of them, not 600, about 60 of them are digitized. That's what you get on Google Translate and stuff. What happens to the 1,940 other languages? They are not in digital format. So we can't even talk about AI because they need to be, first of all, digitized. Most of our context data also is not digitized. How our traditions, our culture has not been captured anywhere. Somebody needs to be able to capture it. So that is the digitalization challenge. Number 2 is the challenge of data being siloed. So we have all this data that is sitting on somebody's server or hard disk or floppy disk, honestly, and it's not somewhere that it can be cleaned or even put in any format. It's not even in a way that it can be utilized for training of models. So is aggregation of this data, cleaning it up, labeling it correctly, and then using it for training of models is a third challenge. And the third one is that labeling. I give this example. In my Kikuyu language, uh, our, our word is made up of maybe 18 tokens. Yeah. That same word in English is 5 tokens. It's pretty expensive to do this work, right? So that's the process of doing that is not inclusive enough. I mean, when I speak to the Chinese or the Indian counterparts, they say the same exact problem. So this data problem has to be solved on multiple layers, digitizing it, labeling and tokenizing it, and also making it highly available for training, being a second one. The third part of it is compute. Africa has one high-performing computer, as one supercomputer on the African continent in Morocco. Given everything I was talking about, you can see why we are lagging behind. So our goal is to talk to everybody who can listen, is give us a gig. Okay, maybe a gig is too huge. Give us a few megabytes of compute here and there. Yeah. Enable us to be able to train our own data sets, train our own models, train our use cases, invest on the African continent's compute. It's an chicken and egg situation. Do you have enough use cases? Is there a return on investment? But somebody has to do this work. Somebody has to do the initial investment. And we are lucky we had Cassava Technologies by Strive Masiwa has done some initial investment and has committed to doing some other investment on the continent, but more needs to be done. And finally, there's use cases. Now I'll come to I'll come. This is the fourth one. This talent as the last one. Use cases is what drives what I've been speaking about, is that you have to make AI real. Everything you're talking about, models and stuff, does not make sense until I have interacted and had a conversation with something that speaks to me. So we are getting people to build use cases is number one, but making people to build viable use cases is number two. But commercially viable use cases is what we need to do to make a conviction of investment of AI in the African continent by both government and private sector, to be totally honest, because even governments are reluctant. Is why are you putting so much money when you can't see a return on investment in terms of impact? So we have to be able to showcase this. And finally, is talent, which is like my pet subject, is that we need to invest in talent in Africa. Africa is contributing to less than 1% of the total AI pool when it comes to research. However, Africa has the vast majority of AI labelers and data annotators in the world. Yeah, we need to equalize this. We need to have more researchers, more agent developers from the African continent. So that is the spectrum of the work, and we are working with amazing partners to be able to build this ecosystem across the continent.
I think there's so many things to pick up on that. Firstly, ages ago, I was kind of CEO of a payment business, so I kind of saw that leap, if you like, that you described earlier in terms of mobile devices, mobile payments, and I like that kind of correlation to that tipping point with AI. Of course, kind of one of the things that I've picked up lots of times is the concern around access in terms of global south to compute power, to the resources that enable you to do those things. But the thing that I loved when you talked in London was those use cases, because they were about making impact for people, making it real for them, as you say. There's an interesting kind of challenge there in terms of how you measure impact. Is impact solely measured by the financial benefit, if you like, or the social impact and the ability to change people's lives? But could you just kind of touch on some of those use cases that you've helped enable, and the difference it's made to people?
So impact is a double bottom line, right? So to say, is both impact on social development, but also impact in terms of money, right? Because if you don't talk in terms of money, most of the private sector runs away. And so the use cases we have been building is, first of all, to showcase the viability of AI use on the African continent. So we've chosen challenges that are day-to-day challenges, but are at scale. Yeah. So they have to be day-to-day, but they also have to be at scale. So I remember I presented about Atunzi. So Atunzi is ATUNZI.ai. In Africa, every young woman, when you are pre-puberty, going into teenagehood, you're always having an auntie hanging out around you, like an older woman. It's an auntie, an older cousin, not necessarily your immediate family, not your sister or your mother. It's somebody just like second level family, like an auntie or a cousin, who basically attaches to you as your mentor, guider, as you're going into your teenagehood. Somebody you talk to about your periods or your boys or whatever challenges that you're going through. Somebody who you don't think is your mother, who's going to judge you, or your sister who's going to tell to your mom, so somebody who is a confidant. And we said, what does this look like in a world where there's multidimensional being a woman? A young woman in 2025 in Africa is quite complicated and complex, right? What if we had an auntie on a mobile phone? What will, if we had an AI auntie companion throughout your life, the way your auntie is, because your auntie stays with you when you get married, when you have your babies, when you're fighting with your husband, they are there throughout your life. What if you had this companion, a life companion who is an AI that is able to work with you throughout your life? And that's what Atunzi was created for, because we are focusing and targeting young women who have challenges but cannot speak directly to their cannot speak directly to their family, or they don't have family because family and community ties have actually been diluted because of urbanization. And that's what we are solving for. And we have discovered that this is something that people actually love. Yeah. And the feedback we've received is a woman who's pregnant is looking at Atunzi, and then their husband is like, I want that Atunzi as well, because it's highly available on WhatsApp. You can just get it accessible. You don't need a third party app. You just use WhatsApp. And we see men also asking questions that they will not ask directly to another man or to a woman either, or to the gynecologist. We've seen women asking. So one of the big things, because we are co-creating with doctors, is they said we need to be able to have vanishing, like Insta stories, or what's the other one? I've forgotten, the one that disappears. Questions, because some of the questions that were being asked is you don't want to keep memory, yeah, because they want to ask and for results to disappear, because they're asking very what is it called? Very intimate questions around their sexuality, around family planning, which to some families is still, for a young woman, is not acceptable. And those are the things we are seeing, which means that it's saving lives for young women, right? It's saving them the mental toll of having to disclose personal things to a stranger. But the one that has a financial implication is Haki, which I presented, which is HAKII.ai. In Africa, about 75 to 80% of the people in the justice system are there because they cannot access legal help. Yeah. And we said we want to solve for this because we have the data set. So Kenya and East Africa has a highly digitized justice system. So we said, because we have the data set, can we solve for this? And that's what we set out to do. And the feedback, we are working with a number of organizations, including Clean Start, which focuses on women primarily. And can you imagine, it's literally thousands of shillings, even pounds actually, to get a lawyer to take you through the justice system for very basic things. And so what we've learned is, by just using this tool, people are able to do deep research on their case. So yesterday we were piloting this with a group of women and said, oh my God, I've just gotten the answer that my lawyer would not have given me without me paying them a couple of thousand. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we even didn't think about this particular use case when we were building this. Because sometimes you just need quick advisory on something, yeah? And it is a use case that we did not anticipate. But for me, it's those women who are able to talk to it in their local language. Sorry, my son has just come in. Can we speak? Let me finish my call. He can speak. Yes, he can speak. Because he's just nodding. He's just nodding because we are recording. Bye bye. Okay. Mary is calling. Yeah, I'll talk to her. Tell her I'll talk to her. Go, bye. Bye. Sorry, it's being a mother. That's why we know that in Natunzi. So for these young men who are going to rot in jail because they don't have access to justice, and with this, even their like social worker, their case program manager is able to walk them through, like, what did you do? Okay, I stole this thing from my neighbor. What should I do? And sometimes it's just a small penalty fee or that they need to pay, but nobody has told them that. So they're spending weeks and months in jail on remand. We call it remand here because they just didn't know, and they've not gotten around to getting that free lawyer coming to them. So for us, it's solving that. But in the process of doing that, we realize that the judges, the student lawyers, the lawyers themselves want to use this because who wants to use the platform, because who wants to read a case from 1790 that they didn't know existed from England? Yeah, and this is a real case, right? Is like, because Kenyan law is based on English law. If you don't have a precedence in Kenya, what do? You go to the English law, and you didn't know this law existed, this case existed, and that's what we are able to provide. And again, there's that commercial benefit out of it, but also the social impact benefit. I always say most things you do in Africa have like a huge social impact to it. Yes.
And I think that, I mean, that the reason I like both examples was because it's very much kind of feeding into that body of knowledge. So how do you kind of bring together kind of that vast experience and indeed continue to feed that? So I'm sure that kind of whether it's done through model training or whether it's done through databases of facts and content that you build up in support of the models, then that's a pattern I'm seeing repeatedly. But I love the fact that they're very much firmly focused around social impact and making people's lives better, because you're enabling them to kind of make better decisions themselves in an environment whereby they haven't necessarily got access to the resources that would have otherwise helped. So it's making that jump again.
Yeah.
That point about language, though, because I mean, obviously, we had, well, obviously, for those listening, there was another speaker, Anna May from the Philippines, who was talking about creating large language models with a multiplicity of languages. How are you finding that across Africa in terms of, I mean, as you said, kind of many of those aren't even digitized, let alone put into some sort of model.
I mean, when like ChatGPT was launched 2023 and Gemini later on, they were doing very poorly on African languages, right? But right now, all of them, Google, I mean, Gemini being the best, is at 60 languages, right? Still leaving a 1,960 languages out, right?
Yeah.
Which means that a big chunk of the continent still remains unserved. Yeah. But not only that is the nuances of the language that that have been digitized. I make this, and I mean, I comment all the time and people think it's a joke. In the US, I can say, speak to me like a local young New Yorker, a 13-old New Yorker, Gen Z, and ChatGPT, Gemini, and all of them will spit out some Gen Z lingua to me. I cannot do that in Nairobi, because Gen Z lingua in Nairobi is very complex. Even I don't understand it. And ChatGPT does not understand it.
Yeah.
And in Kenya, we have something called Sheng. So what I've just told you is something called Sheng. Sheng is a highly recognized language as a language in Kenya, which is a mixture of several languages and some made-up words, or some reverse words, depending on where you're coming from. And we realize this is a problem. So let me give you an example. We were building a mental health board for young people during COVID. And we did a brilliant job in getting a knowledge base. We co-created with therapists. Everything was working in English. We tested and we got like some really good traction until the conversion started being done in Sheng, which is the Gen Z version of languaging here. And we hit a block. We call it the data wall block, because we realized that while we had a perfect product, it was not perfect for our market because the language was not working.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, let's go and find if somebody has done a Sheng language base. We couldn't find anywhere. And that's when you realize that it's not solving, the language base is not solving for what is real, what we speak, how we speak it. So we eventually, I mean, right now we eventually solve for this by building our own model, a language model for Sheng that you can find on Hugging Face. I mean, just if you go and find color on Hugging Face, you'll find the language model for Sheng that you can use for anything that you're building for Kenya at least. But also you realize that all these models are being built on the King James version of our language. So the King James version of English, the King James version of Kiswahili, the King James version of Kikuyu, which is my mother tongue, because but the biblical text is the most translated one. And it is the one that was used to train most of the model, which means I don't know what they're talking about 90% of the time because I don't speak that Kiswahili and I don't speak that Kikuyu. And for us, that is a challenge. So we need to be able to not only digitize, but also modernize and contextualize the language that these models are speaking, because they're not relevant for our time.
And I think what we've seen in a different environment, doing different types of work, but using multi-agents, where we're able to continue to layer on know-how, spoken kind of understanding on top of trained models, then we've been able to evolve that. So I guess, as you've described actually in that example where you've begun to create a model for Sheng, in essence, then the technology enables you to make progress in addressing some of those challenges. It's just how do you do that at scale and speed and ensure that you've got access to, well, as many people across the continent as possible being part of that. And I think maybe that leads on to kind of another area that I was keen to explore before we finish, which was your AI Talent Readiness Index, because I think that goes back to your point around passion for talent and how do you identify and how do you grow and then how do you connect that talent to the work that enables them to do some amazing things. It would be good to hear a bit about that before we finish.
Thank you for raising that. As I mentioned, talent is like my pet passion because we need to solve for it at scale. So this morning we had professors from Harvard, Oxford, Columbia, a few other universities from the US, and then professors from Kenya, University of Nairobi, JKUAT, and other universities. And it was like we were talking about talent because that's a key thing that we're trying to solve for. And the question is, at what level do we need to solve for it? And when we're doing the talent index, the question that we're posing is, we want to solve for talent, but what are we solving for exactly? Yeah. And the talent index just wanted to develop a baseline of where is Africa at when it comes to talent. And we looked at different metrics around how we'd measure talent readiness. And we've gotten into many fights with many African governments. Oh, my country is doing much better on that aspect. I said, okay, provide for us the data to improve. This is like self-reported data. Provide us the data, will improve. The metrics will change automatically the moment we update the data. Which speaks to the point that there's not even enough data to measure the readiness, which is pretty sad in some cases, right? But for us, in terms of readiness, we mapped it out is like, what talent do we need? We need from the basic data collection and digitization and labeling to PhDs, yeah, in machine learning, yeah. the whole spectrum. So we know for sure we need 5,000 PhDs in machine learning in the next few years. But what are we doing right now? Because you can't wait for 5 years. Is what agentic AI engineers are we training? What are the labelers and data collectors are we training right now? I mean, Nigeria has launched the 3MTT program for data collection and labeling for Nigeria. Is how do we do this at scale is the question. And for us, measuring is important. So the index that you saw is the first baseline one. And in July, end of July, we are going to be updating it a little to showcase where we should be going, which is just the next level of it. And for us, it is important to measure so that we can show direction. So next week, for example, we are going to be launching the Africa AI Literacy Week and campaign, which we'll be doing consistently for the next year, because our goal is to be able to train 15% of the African continent. I mean, the uptake has been amazing. We've gotten amazing partners from across the continent who are willing to do that. We have gotten amazing partners. NVIDIA has given us content. Microsoft has given us content. DeepMind has given us content. And MIT, we are partnering with MIT to give us more content. So our goal is to be able to aggregate this content and organize it in a way that's relevant for the continent so that anybody can be able to do it. We are training teachers. This weekend, we are training about 500 teachers across Kenya on AI in the educator space. And we are training them as trainers so that they can go and train their friends and family. So hopefully that is a scalable model that we are trying to adapt, is from basic AI awareness to developers to researchers who are able to build that IP for the African continent.
And
Yes.
and maybe it's almost the opportunity to reimagine education in the context of an AI world. So
Yes.
if you've got these kind of different ways of potential working or learning, how do you actually kind of put that on in place for everybody versus kind of a more established education system, like pick the UK, which will be so slow to change because it's worked that way forever, and therefore its ability to just react, you can be more agile.
Yeah. And for us, guys, what you're saying, we're not changing your curriculum. We are giving you extra curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are giving you an ability to modernize your curriculum without the effort of changing your curriculum. So you're saying we are not changing biology, but this is a better way of applying the same curriculum with AI tools. Because changing curriculum in Kenya is a multi-year process, or in Africa anywhere, is how do we modernize this as as an extra curriculum, not a core curriculum activity, which helps move the ball faster. It's like, oh, let's play soccer. Oh, let's go and learn AI. And this is enabling us integrate that faster. So even as the government and the education systems are rethinking about that, the kids and the students and the teachers are already benefiting from this revolution.
Chico, that's been fascinating to listen to and to hear about the work that you're doing. If you've got, in a few words, a final message for people listening, in terms of your hope and the opportunity for AI and agents and agentic AI for Africa, what would that message be?
So for me, as I mentioned, AI is a consequential technology for our generation. It is not going away. Everybody is hoping it's a buzzword that is going to go away. It is not going away. It is here. So it's adapt, because the AI is not taking your job. It's the person using AI that is going to be taking your job. The person who's going to be optimizing for efficiency and the use of technology of AI is one who's going to take your job. Because the faster I can be able to adapt, the faster I can be able to move to the next level. And it's the ability to being creative and agile to adapting and knowing that, yeah, it is here to stay, better adapt.
Thank you, Chico. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.